Subscribe to that More Sussex Sports on YouTube.
Yes, I am on there.
I am on there to watch the games. They pop up on there.
Actually, the Knowles Del Barton game is on right now for JV. My girls.
It's great. Imagine if they had that technology when we were in high school.
Oh yeah, that would have been great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we used to have our Rockets videotaped, and on TV. Come on, Joe. When I played, we were live on Channel 3.
Your reel-to-reel doesn't count, Doug.
I don't know.
They had chalkboards when I was playing.
Their helmets when you were playing, John.
No, wait. A little after that, but not much. I will tell you, though, that in high school, I didn't have a face mask.
There you go. Oh.
How you doing, Ray?
All right. It took me a little bit to get fired up here and get on.
That's all right.
You're on.
Yeah, I guess I didn't have. I don't know. I won't even try and explain it. I'm just glad I'm here.
Should be in a second.
Okay.
Welcome to my club, Ray.
Back. All right.
Yeah.
Hey, Manning? Are you in, Manning?
Who's got the timer on?
Yeah, what's that noise?
Is that a woodpecker?
Yeah, holy cow. Now Ray's on 3 times now. Ray's on twice. How's that?
You need a Screen Actors Guild card to do that.
I know. What is that, Chrissy?
I think he's on his phone.
Oh, okay. Doesn't matter. Get the two of you on a screen. It's like looking at time-lapse photography, Ray and Ray. Oh, there's Manny.
All right, we're successful. All right.
I don't see him.
He'll come.
Gonna show your face, Manny?
Oh, God.
You're not muted, Pat.
Oh.
Oh, boy.
It's a rough crowd.
Mm-hmm. There he is. Okay, so I think the only person we can't see right now is Tucker. Is he out there? Mr. Kelly? There he is. Okay. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 5:09. Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of
flag
the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silence to remember the service and sacrifice of the armed service members who protect our nation and the first responders who protect our neighborhoods. Clerk, please take the roll call.
Councilmember Kelly,
Here.
Councilmember Quinn,
Here.
Councilmember Friedlander,
Here.
Councilmember Kritz.
Here.
Councilmember Salberg,
Here.
Councilmember Brooks, Councilmember Noon,
Here.
Vice President Sackett,
Here.
President Jackson.
Here. This meeting was advertised in the Daily Record and the Star Ledger, the official newspapers for the Township of Rockaway, on February 5th, 2021. Notice was posted on the official bulletin boards of the Township of Rockaway Township. Before we get into the budget discussion, just a couple things. Number one, I want to welcome back our clerk, Christina Clipperton. Liz did a great job. Liz Peterson did a great job filling in on your absence, and welcome back and congratulations, on the birth of your daughter. So welcome back.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, Mayor, I think you might have had something you wanted to say.
I did. I'm going to be brief before we get started. I just wanted to thank everybody for the time and effort that they put into the budget. It's not a simple process. It happens over the course of a few months with the input from our department heads, from various folks within the township, from some of our professionals. This is the time when our CFO, Lisa Palmieri, really gets put, to task to put this together. It's not, like I said, it's not a simple process. The numbers change each year. We have personnel who retire. We hire new personnel. So it's a moving process, the budget, that doesn't happen overnight. With that said, we're going to try to answer your questions, the council's questions, because I know how important this is. This is the main function for being a councilman, is to set the budget and to deal with the monies that the town collects through the residents. And I know each year you guys do a great job. We try to be fiscally responsible, and I know that's going to happen this year. And I hope that we are able to answer all your questions tonight. If not, we will definitely get back to you. I appreciate those that reached out to the administration to get clarification on things, and to make this a much more hopefully a smoother process. And I'm going to turn it back over to Council President Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next, I'm going to open up the floor for Mr. Sarinelli. I don't know if one or both of you are going to speak, but go ahead.
So I'm going to start everybody off with just a brief review of 2020. And I'm happy to report there's some good news. I think a lot of towns aren't going to get a lot of good news from their auditor this year. But because you've spent a lot of time on reasonable budgeting, I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback. I got to adjust something.
I think too,
Okay.
everybody, if you can mute.
So, as I was saying, you had a very stable year in spite of the pandemic. In looking at your fund balance, which is a good thing. And I went back and looked at the last 5 years to try and get a trend line of where things were as compared to 2020. And in looking at it, in 2017, you were at a high of 6.6. And then over the last 3 years, it's been a nice even keel. You've been hovering right around 6.2 million. So in 2019, it was 6.289, and in 2020, it was 6.250. So a slight decrease of right around 40,000. But if you look at that in the year that we had, I think that's a great accomplishment to have a nice steady fund balance and have your fund balance regenerate. Every year, particularly in 2020, there's a lot of unforeseen things that can happen. Some are good, some are bad, but if you put together a reasonable budget where you don't over anticipate on your revenues and don't under budget on your expenditures, you're prepared for the worst, and if some good things happen, things turn out better than you expect. There were some shortfalls in your revenues to come in less than budgeted amounts. Obviously, the pandemic had an impact on interest rates and things of that nature, which caused some shortfalls in some revenues. But also in some miscellaneous revenues, you were able to collect on the mall contract that kind of offset that loss of anticipated revenue. So, some good, some bad, everything kind of worked out in the end. Something that's very good that we were very uncertain of when the pandemic first started. The tax collections, everybody was worried about it, and your collection percentage was 98.98 for 2020, which is just, it's great. Your collection percentage in 2019 was 99.12, and in 2018 it was 98.82. So really, no big fluctuation in the collection of your taxes, which is just a great thing to see. All of your other revenues came in really as expected, as well as your expenses. So as I was saying, you started the year at 6.289 in your fund balance. You used 3.8 million to balance the 2020 budget, and you made 3.789 back. So roughly a $40,000 decrease in the fund balance. All of your reserves are still healthy and stable. Really a nice financial picture in your general operations. The water utility is in excellent shape. You started the year at 1.7 million, used 260 to balance the water utility budget, made 250,000 back to end the year at 1.711. So fund balance looks stable in the water utility as well. So overall, everything looks good financially, and you're prepared for the 2021 budget.
Thank you.
Okay, so we said we would split up our presentation. Ray did the recap of last year, and then I would do just some brief commentary on the 2021 budget that is being presented to you tonight. I did have a chance, Lisa has been sharing her draft budgets with me, and I did have a chance to go through the budget in detail, and we had some good discussions about it. I think the backdrop to all this, that this is basically the third year in a row that the budget not the budget, but the tax effort either decreased, was the same, and now has a small increase going forward. All things being reasonable, that seems to be a good position to be in. I think it has to do with the planning that you did during the run-up that put you in good shape, and you planned accordingly so that you could deal with such a difficult time and not have a particularly large increase. I went over the revenues with Lisa. They all seemed sound and reasonable. The only new item of revenue in this year's budget is you have $180,000 for the mall agreement now that that's settled and you have a final contract with them. You're also using 50,000 more in fund balance, and I think this is now the time to do that. You've done some good planning, and when people need it the most is when you put a little bit more back on the table. There is a tax increase of 1.69% to the average taxpayer in Rockaway Township, which right now amounts to about $40. I went through the appropriations with Lisa in detail. Pretty much, it's, in my view, a status quo budget. There's no real change in service. The biggest hurdles that administration had to get over in presenting a good budget was that the pension expenses were up $270,000 or about 11%. That you don't have a say in that. That's what the state sends you as a bill, and you really don't have control in it. The only other revenue or appropriation that I saw that fluctuated was the garbage and recycling costs increased between the two of them over $100,000, which is about a 10% increase as well. So based on my overall review of the budget, it seems pretty straightforward and pretty reasonable. It's compliant with both the 77 cap and it's also compliant with the 2010 levy cap. I think you're aware that the budget timeframe had been moved back, but the budget needs to be introduced by March 30th and adopted by April 30th. I wish you good luck with the process. It seems like you have a very good starting point. And I guess I would also add that I did look at the water utility budget, and that budget is solid and should be solid for the next few years.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. Thank you both for the effort you do for our township. With that, we're going to get into the budget discussion. As we did last year, we're going to allocate time for each section. If we don't get through the ones we want to get through tonight, we'll move them to Thursday night, and then we have the meeting next week. If we don't have the time, if we don't have everything done by then, we'll just advertise for another meeting. But I think, like me, several other council members already sent our questions into administration, and Ms. Palmieri got answers on a lot of things. So hopefully we'll be productive, and we'll go from there. So,
Mr. Jackson, if I could be recognized real quick.
Sure, real quick.
Since we have Mr. Serenelli, Senior and Junior, just maybe the offering of maybe any questions to either of the two before they tap off the meeting.
I'll allow 5 minutes of questions. So if anybody has any questions, speak up.
No, I would go last if anybody else has anything. Before.
Go ahead, Mr. Kelly. You have a question? Go ahead.
This could go to either first of all, Mr. Serenelli and Ray Jr. as well. Thank you for everything you do. I hope your families are safe and healthy during this pandemic moving forward. And I do always appreciate the efforts that you do to make sure that we have a sound budget with recommendations as well. One concern that I've had since the pandemic hit and the executive order started to kick in back in early March of 2020, a lot of our assessments are related to vacancies or no vacancies on the commercial end. And I'm wondering, with a lot of that concern where some of the businesses have shut down and closed, creating vacancies for commercial properties, from what you reviewed from the budget, we don't know if we're going to have X amount of tax appeals until the filing date. But do you have any concerns of some of our levels where they're at right now to where we could have some potential tax appeals due to the vacancies that happened with the pandemic?
Ray, you want me to go with that, or are you?
You know the history on this. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, there is a long history of tax appeals, enormously problematic for Rockaway Township in the past. I do share some concerns going forward, what the prospect for future tax appeals might be. Fortunately, as the run-up was occurring and you were paying off the old tax appeals, you started to create a pretty sizable reserve for pending tax appeals. And there is a substantial balance available at this point. Unfortunately, your assessor had passed away in the last month or so, and we always relied heavily on him at the end of the year to give us an assessment of where things stand. And, we're all missing him terribly. And one of the things we're missing is his input on where that reserve should be. So it's basically the same as it was at the end of last year. And I think both Ray and I have looked at that number, and we're comfortable at this point going forward with this budget that the reserve for pending tax appeals should be sufficient.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said thank you. Okay. Anything else?
I don't know if anybody else has anything other than me. I would hope so.
I think if you do, you're welcome to funnel your question through the administration like your other questions, and they'll get to Mr. Sarinelli, and we'll get our questions answered if you do have any other questions from them. With that said, thanks again for joining the call. You guys are obviously welcome to stay on as long as you want, or you can drop off. And we're going to get into the budget. So let's start with Department 100. And let's spend 15 minutes on this department if possible. So Department 100 is administrative and executive. What questions does anybody have on this?
I actually have one quick question first, Council President.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
We have this meeting is being live streamed for the public to review, right?
I believe so, right, Ms. Clipperton?
She's muted.
Yeah, it's live streaming.
Yes.
With that being said, does the public have the ability to follow through each sheet to go over it with us as we're addressing each chapter of each account line and each department number?
I'm not sure. I'll know Mrs. Seeger if it's out there or what's required. Mr. Yachfano, in terms of Mr. Kelly wants to know if the members of the public can review the budget. I don't think it's been issued to the public yet because it's still in draft phase.
That's correct, Council President. At this point, it's a budget report that's presented to the council as an advisory, consultative, and deliberative document. The public will have the opportunity to see the budget, which will be published when the agenda for the meeting at which the budget will be introduced is listed.
Thank you.
And Mr. Yachfano? Mr. Yachfano?
Yes.
Is there anything that bars, because in the past, as you're aware, we've actually have put this on our website in electronic form so that members can go through the budget as we are discussing them. And if it was something that we had a meeting in town hall where people can attend physically in that meeting, there would be something for them to review. So I can't see how a member of the public would have the ability to ask a question about a certain area in the budget that maybe we oversaw without having the ability to have access to this. We're talking and discussing about this in an open forum. So I think any shielding of that, I think would be waived right now, no?
Absent the innuendo, Mr. Kelly, is there a question there somewhere?
I mean, I appreciate your sarcasm and I recognize it deeply. But as a legal counsel for the Township of Rockaway, I'm just wondering what bars us from allowing the public to review this as we're discussing it in an open forum.
It's an administrative decision, Mr. Kelly. This is the administration's budget. The administration has taken the approach that they've taken. That's my only comment.
Well, Mr. Yachfano,
listen, that's it. That's the end of the questions.
It's not.
We had a public meeting. We had a public meeting
Nobody knew
last
about
year.
it not being posted or not being posted.
We had a public meeting last year and nobody came. So I understand that the year before you create a whole circus environment.
There's no
That's
circus
not what
environment.
we're doing. That's not what we're doing. We're going through the
I
budget.
just want the public to
We'll
have
have it.
transparency.
You're elected. You're an elected official. You're representing your ward. And so your job is to go through this budget and represent them. And most
the
of
budget
us
isn't
already
per
fielded
ward, Mr.
questions.
President.
Most of us have picked up the budget and reviewed it and asked questions already. So we're moving forward. What questions do we have on Department 100?
President,
Yes.
I have a question.
Go
Department
ahead, Mr.
100,
Sackett. Yep.
page 33, sub-account number 29. Contractual fees. So in 2020, we had adopted 170,000. We only had expended through the end of the year approximately 92. 150 was requested, and then we bumped it up to 200. I'm just trying to understand that with the 150, I feel that's a reasonable number. Why are we bumping it up another 50? Because we only used 92. So maybe even 100 would have been a reasonable request.
Mr. Sackett, you said page 33?
Yes.
I'm on page 33. I only see legal services.
No, page,
Sub-account
yeah, I see it. Yep. Page 33, 2021 budget request.
So I'm just wondering if there's any certain reason why it's been bumped up so much.
Yeah, can I respond to that?
Sure, I didn't hear. Sorry about that.
You're recognized.
Thank you. We spent, you're right, it shows we spent 92, but remember that the November and December invoices have not been reflected here. They usually come in January and February. So there's at least 1 to 2 months that we're going to be charging against the 2020 budget that won't occur until 2021. So that's part of the reason why the 92 looks so low.
Which I definitely understand, and that's why I was thinking the request of 150,000 would be a reasonable request. I'm just trying to figure out why we're just bumped up to an additional 50 on top of that.
Okay, Pat, I think Pat's going to answer that.
I can answer that. That's why I lowered the professionals and consultant, because we were putting things in the wrong, not in the right category. So more of our money was spent in contractual fees than it was professional. So I moved it around. And it's the bottom line of the budget is exactly the same. I just put it in the category where we spend it.
Subtracted and added.
Yes. Does that answer your question, Jonathan?
So that's still low. So for all those categories on this page, none of them. So the November, December bills aren't reflected in the expended amount yet.
Not yet, correct.
Do we have a
That's
projection
true
of what
with a
that
lot of
is?
the line items that you're looking at. Just keep that in mind as you go through the budget. Like in utilities, there's a lot of the monthly expenses that are, normally come every month. It's going to be the same story throughout the whole budget, that those November and December invoices are going to be charged against the 21-20 budget, but it's not going to occur until 2021.
When do we normally get those invoices?
Usually we get them by the third week of the following month. But then it takes time to put them on, get them encumbered, get them signed, cut the check. It's not just as simple as soon as it hits the office, there's a check cut.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You okay with that, Mr. Sackett?
Yeah, I have another question. Probably going to be the similar answer. Page 37, sub-account number 28. Once again, professional consulting. 2020 budget of 122. We expended almost 94. We requested the same in 2021. Do you think that'll come out, Lisa, to approximately the same again, 122?
I believe the engineer was looking for additional monies for, well, yes, it would be the following year. But this is for work that is done, contracting out, not done in-house. And she felt that she would be spending equal to what she had spent the years prior. And again, those monthly invoices would be coming in January.
And if I remember correctly, Lisa, she said it was because of COVID, they didn't get as many of their projects done that were pushed off to this year because of the COVID.
Is there a way, I guess I'd ask, like, going forward, I know it's not encumbered and paid, but, based on the fact we got these books, the second week of January, is there a way to at least capture what we're going to be spending at least for November and get them in this books somehow? I mean, is this all automated, Lisa? Is this just pulled from the GL system?
It's pulled from the GL system.
Oh, okay. So
it's not
it'd be a very manual process then. Yeah, I
very
got you.
manual. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, okay.
And also, like these books, we're going to get an audit report that's going to be as of December 31st, 2020.
Right.
These books are going to be in line with that audit. So, yeah.
Were these questions asked in an email prior to tonight's meeting?
Sounds like he's asking the question now.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Ms. Seeger, Ms. Palmieri, perhaps you can, so I had some questions around the provision for salary adjustments and employee promotions. Like there's different amounts scattered throughout the entire budget in different departments. Could you maybe just make a little statement on what those are and how those are allocated?
Sure. Each department that has a provision for salary adjustment included at the bottom of that page, there are employees within that department that the mayor is interested in giving an additional funds to. That's all I can say on it as far as who they are. I'm not necessarily privy to that, but where you see a line in the budget or in that salary page, that's for that department to be.
And if some of it could be people are moving on a step in a contract too?
The only steps that actually occur in the police department, we no longer have steps in the
Contract.
6 contracts. Correct.
So with these department heads would have made a case to administration all asking for whatever, and then that gets put in the budget if it's approved.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else have questions?
I do, but I'll wait till everybody else is done on this account.
Go ahead and ask your questions, Mr. Kelly.
Well, they could develop on there afterwards too.
Go ahead and ask your questions, Mr. Kelly.
Well, on page 9 that we have, which is Department 110.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make a motion to set our salaries back to 2019 levels. And it looks like the total amount would be 39,517. So it would just bring each salary down for the mayor at $8,967. The council president, $7,111, and the rest of the council members would be a total of $30,550. I figure all of us are professionals, and maybe we could just show a little bit by not taking an increase for our role in the township.
Anybody want to second Mr. Kelly's motion?
None of you guys want to give up a couple $100, huh, Mr. Kritz?
Gotta make commentary, right, Mr. Kelly? I thought we were professional. You're the farthest.
Yeah, you started off with it already in the beginning.
You're the farthest thing from professional.
I'm just surprised that nobody wants to give up a couple $100.
Nobody's seconding the motion. What other questions do you have, Mr. Kelly?
I do. I'll go through it accordingly. We have on page 11, conference and meetings and equipment and supplies. It shows that we haven't expended anything on sub-account 041. In 2018 and 19, as well as 20, we haven't spent any money, and we're requesting another $500.
Council President,
I
can address that if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah.
The reason that $500 is still in that account is because there was council interest in participating in the League of Municipalities, and then for 2020 things got a little messy. So that's the reason that $500 is still in that account, even though it's gone unexpended.
But it's even unexpended from 2018 as well as 19. So it seems like it has a pattern for the last 3 years. I don't have 17 right now in front of me, but it hasn't been used. So since we haven't used it,
I thought new members were interested in attending.
let them use their own money.
You have a motion you want, Mr. Kelly, you have a motion you want to make?
Just because of the lack of usage from the last 3 years of an average, I would say that we would make a motion to remove the $500 from sub-account 041.
Anybody want to second that? Okay. Good for your next question, Mr. Kelly.
Okay, let me just, we have on page 13, department number 120.
Yep.
On page 13, we have the municipal clerk, and the clerk that had retired prior to Mrs. Clipperton, Susan Best, she retired at $83,370, holding an RMC. We currently have our municipal clerk here. I was supposed to have an increase to her salary for receiving the RMC. So I'm going to make a motion to increase the salary of the clerk from $74,212 to $80,000.
Anybody want to second that motion? Okay, what's your next question or motion, Mr. Kelly?
We have in our on page 18, department number 130, we have the senior accountant, and the approved 2020 salary was $77,917, and now the proposed salary for that person is $82,454, which appears to be above the 2% cap. Is there a reason for that?
Can I address that?
Sure.
You're actually, since I'm running the meeting, I'll tell you, Ms. Palmieri, you're recognized and you can answer.
Go ahead, Ms. Palmieri.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jackson, I am
Stop it.
recognized.
I listen, I appreciate you trying to run the meeting, but you're not.
I'm not running the meeting. I'm just saying thank you.
No, but don't
Thank you, Ms. Palmieri.
I do, okay? I know you're trying to be an angel and be nice to everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Palmieri. I'm interested in the answer.
You're recognized, Ms. Palmieri.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the senior accountant was given an increase in pay in 2020. Again, you see that line provision for salary adjustments. There was $6,700 allocated in 2020. A portion of that $6,700 was given to the senior accountant as well as the payroll and pension supervisor. So therefore, yes, it appears as though they received more than the 2% rate, 1.9% raise in 21, but it was actually an increase in 20.
So they got their adjustment, and then on top of the adjustment is where the 2% then goes on top of it?
Yes, they received that adjustment in 2020. You're looking at an adopted approved budget, which is what you approved. You can see the allocation. There was $6,700 that was included in 2020 that was allocated to those two individuals, and then they received in 2021. We're proposing a 1.9% increase for each individual.
And was there any movement at all, Mrs. Palmieri, like somebody getting another certification or additional education or credits of some sort that would somewhat justify that kind of an increase in addition to the 2% cap?
No, but it was all based on performance.
You know what? That's your recommendation.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Palmieri.
You're welcome.
Okay. Next question.
I'm still going, yeah.
Yeah, I know you are.
We have on page 26, it looks like sub-account 26, and it's got equipment maintenance. So in 2018, we expended a $395, and then we haven't spent anything in 19 as well as 20. What would be like something that we were going to use this for? It says the payment drop box in the walk-in safe. Is there like maintenance that is required on that, or sometimes the repairs that happen from usage?
Can I address that?
You're recognized, Ms. Palmieri.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Palmieri.
There is, things are on an as-needed basis. We have not had to make repairs to the drop box or the walk-in safe, but we keep these funds available in case there are necessary repairs. We've been, good so far. The last time we spent anything was back in 2008.
Thank you, Ms. Palmieri. On page 29, department number 150. Everybody on there?
Yep.
We have the deputy tax assessor. And we have the tax assessor at 118,727. Have we filled the tax assessor position yet?
Mike,
We have not.
Mr. Jackson,
You're recognized, Ms. Seeger.
we have a advertisement out. We had one interview so far, and we have some more scheduled for the position.
Have you filled the position yet, Mrs. Seeger?
I just told you what.
It's a yes or no. I mean, I appreciate you've sent out some advertising. Do we have a tax assessor?
I appreciate you. Hey, Mr. Kelly, there's no reason to chastise the business.
I'm not chastising her. I'm asking her if we have
providing
a
an
tax
update.
assessor.
She was providing an update in a relatively
Mr.
intelligent.
Jackson, do we have a tax assessor?
An intelligently.
Mr. Jackson, do we have a tax assessor?
An intelligent person would have realized based on her update, we haven't hired one. Obviously, you have.
Okay, so we don't have one. So we have a deputy tax assessor.
Kelly continues to be disrespectful to the business administrator or anybody in the administration. We're not going to be answering the questions.
Through your own words, Mr. Puzio. So therefore, the deputy tax assessor is taking the role of the tax assessor and doing the functions as a tax assessor. Then I would make a motion to increase the tax assessor's salary to address to the functions that she's doing from $56,045 to $75,000.
Is there a second?
I believe that she's worth the $75,000 and she's underpaid.
Okay, next question, Mr. Kelly. There was no second.
We have on 35 on sub account, I'm sorry, on department number 165. We have in 2017 an overtime request for $2,500. Then we have approved for 1,000 in 2018, 1,000 for 2019, and 1,000 for 2020. Is there a reason why we doubled it for this proposed budget to 2,000?
Ms. Ferrante, put it in there to cover the overtime of inspections if we have different projects. And she realized that she needed it and she requested it for more projects.
Have we spent the overtime so far? How much of the overtime have we exhausted in 2020?
Says $1,000 on page 37.
So we expended up to the 2020 of December, 963. So I would say that we would, and we were dealing with all that during the pandemic, with all the overtime and doing extra stuff that's there. I would make a motion to reduce the overtime from $2,000 to $1,000 again, just like the years prior.
I'll second the motion.
I'll second that. Oh, you beat me.
Clerk, take the roll call.
Councilmember Kelly,
Yes.
Councilmember Quinn,
No.
Councilmember Friedlander,
No.
Councilmember Kritz,
No.
Councilmember Salberg.
No.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
He said no.
Thank you.
Somebody sounds like they had a lawnmower going.
Yeah.
He's got something going on.
Brooks,
There we go.
Yes.
Councilmember Noon,
No.
Vice President Sackett,
Yes.
President Jackson.
Yes, that's 4 yeses, 5 nos. The budget will remain at 2,000. Next question, Mr. Kelly.
I'm gonna hold back for a moment and let somebody else go ahead.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Mr. Freelander.
Manny, you're recognized.
Thank you, Council President.
You're welcome.
You know, I was thinking of this. In a budget this size, we're looking at things and people are talking about cut $200 here, $500 here, $1,000. Can't we just take a running total of all these little amounts that obviously bothers just a little bit too high to a number and let the administration decide where those cuts are? I mean, we're arbitrarily saying, well, you know, like this, the overtime. If they need it, there's obviously a reason why the department head figures that number out. Why can't we just take a running total and just let them handle it? In other words, if we're going to cut 50,000, 60,000, even 10 grand, let them, you know, if we tell them they got to take 10 grand off or 50,000 off, let them decide where it goes off.
Can I address Mr. Freelander? That's a good question, Mr. Freelander.
Mr. Kelly, you're recognized.
Freelander, you know, and you make some good points on that, as they're saying that they need this money now for the $2,000. But when they said they needed the $2,500 in 2017 and didn't expense it, or when they said they needed the $1,000 in the year before and they didn't use it, you know, it's no different than it is right now. But our legislative function, we're really the purse strings when it comes to the budget. The key with the mayor for the budget, I believe, I would imagine most mayors do this. You come up and say, listen, do the best that you can and give it to me. That's why there's recommendations, requests, and then there's recommendations. So that portion of what you're saying that you want us to do or have them to do, they've already done it. That's the whole budget process before it comes to us. Now, this budget was done, it looks like January 14th of this year. So all of that preliminary that you want done has already been done for us to review it. And when we look at it, Mr. Freelander, I know that there's these $200 like the council's salary. I thought that, you know, you add $200 5 times, you got $1,000. So nickels and dimes do add up to some big cents. So when we start doing this over the numerous amount of pages that we have here, different chapters of 24 total, and we're dealing with this large amount of money that's here, I'm trying to look to cover the cost of the increases that we have in pension. So we got a $270,000 plus amount of an increase here, where if we nip in at some of these other things that we look at, and I know they may be small numbers and you're not interested in the small numbers, I don't know.
No, what I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying, Mr.
I'm
Freelander.
asking Mr. Freelander, though. I appreciate you understanding it.
I appreciate.
I understand where you're coming from.
So that's where when I come up with these numbers, I'm not trying to be antagonistic and whatnot. I'm looking at these things and I see some of these employees that we have, Mr. Freelander, that are definitely underpaid. So here we are with these other employees that are underpaid, and our own council won't shed $200 from their salary. That blows my mind.
Okay. All right, that's enough of that discussion.
Sure.
You're grandstanding. Vote for Kelly 2021. All right. Any other questions in section 1?
Yes, Council President.
Go ahead.
So, and just before I bring it up, I just have a question. So in a case of the overtime, if we approve $2,000 and we don't use $2,000, is that money lost?
Goes into the fund balance, I believe. Is that right, Ms. Palmieri?
Yes, that's correct. It goes into whatever's unexpended from most of the salary lines would actually go into what we call reserve for AccuVac. I take the balances at the end of next year, which would be at the end of 22, And those balances go into our reserve for AccuTrack so that when people retire, we have sufficient funds to pay them their accumulated vacation, sick, and personal time.
Okay,
You may
so it's not,
recall, go ahead.
I'm sorry, so it's not wasted. We're just, so in past years, when we've allocated it and not used it, it's not wasted money.
Absolutely not wasted. What Mr. Jackson was referring to is on the operating expense side. Yes, after the second year in 22, at the end of 22, any unexpended OE operating expenses go into fund balance and are used to offset taxes in that year.
Okay.
So again, not wasted.
Okay.
Mrs. Palmieri, can I have a question to finish with that?
No,
Just
you
to follow
can't.
up on that,
No,
Mr. Jackson,
no, you
Mr.
can't.
Kritz?
No, you can't. Let Mr. Kritz
Well,
finish.
it's
Go ahead,
Kritz's
Mr. Kritz.
time. I'm just asking Mr.
No,
Kritz.
Mr. Kelly, you're not recognized. You're out of order. Please stop talking. Go ahead, Mr. Kritz.
Okay. And actually, I think it's funny that Mr. Kelly singled me out for some reason when talking about council salaries, and I appreciate that because I actually wanted to start talking about that. I feel that compared to other towns, and I understand that we froze salaries a number of years ago. I'd actually like to I'd like to make a motion to start bringing those numbers actually up and back in line with other towns and with the job that everybody on this council and administration is doing. So I'd like to make a motion to increase the mayor to $15,000.
What?
Mr. Kelly, it's my
Mr. Kelly, it's just you say you're a professional.
Oh, I thought this. I didn't know this was a comedy show.
You're a high schooler, Mr. Kelly. You're a high schooler.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Kritz.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to increase the council president to $10,000. And I'd like to make a motion to increase council members to $8,000.
We had discussion on that?
Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Wow.
Okay.
Discussion?
No.
What do you
There's
mean
no
no?
need for
You
discussion.
you have,
I don't have to have discussion. We don't have to have discussion.
if you got a $3,000 increase
Clerk, take
times,
the roll. Clerk,
times
take the roll
7.
call.
Councilmember Kritz, I would just like to confirm that I have those numbers written down correctly. You have the mayor to 15,000, council president to 10, and council members to 8, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly?
They won't increase your salary, clerk, but they want to increase their own. No way.
Councilmember Quinn?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedlander?
No.
Thank you, Manny.
Councilmember Kritz?
You, Mr. Kelly.
Councilmember Salberg?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Abstain.
Councilmember Noon? Did anyone hear her?
No.
Yes.
Vice President Sackett?
No.
President Jackson?
Yes. That's 5 yeses, 3 noes, and abstention.
During a pandemic.
Any other questions in section 1? All right. Somebody like to make a motion to?
I have a question, Council President.
Go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
It's for Mrs. Palmieri.
Go back for 1 second. I'm sorry, I'm just.
Yeah, that's okay, Ms. Palmieri.
Hold on.
I don't know if you've been recognized yet, though.
Can we ask Mr. Iacofano how an abstention is counted? I believe we need
You need
6
to
yes
increase.
votes to increase a line in the budget.
Yeah.
It's a no
We
vote.
only got 5, so it doesn't increase. That's correct.
Thank you.
The abstention does not count as a yes or a no.
That is correct, Ms. Palmer.
Yep. You have any other questions, Mr. Kelly?
I do have another question. Mrs. Palmieri, when we were talking about putting things back into the reserve fund, when we have an amount of money that we put in there, Mr. Kritz was talking about the $2,000 for overtime, or even if it was $4,000 of overtime, it goes back into the fund next year, right?
Well, what I was saying earlier was that any salary and wage line, which includes overtime, anything unexpended, I transfer to the AccuVac Reserve Trust to be used to pay down people when they retire.
But even if it doesn't get used, it just goes into something else. But
It doesn't get used, it stays in that trust until it is used. So that trust, just like the tax appeal reserve, it builds over time until such time that it's needed. When, if a police officer retires, we know how much that can add up to. So that, there was one year, I think it was back in 2011, we had, I think like 12 or 13 clerical staff leave at once. It was something like $1 million in AccuVac that we had to lay out.
when we have that, Mrs. Palmieri, what actually bars us from putting $10,000 in overtime? If the way you look at it is it just goes back into account for a later use. Overall, though, even if it's an inflated amount, more than what we currently use as an average in the last 3 years, do the taxpayers still pay for that?
If it's part of the budget, yes, it's part of the.
Okay, so we can inflate it to whatever number we want. You can tell Mr. Kritz that it goes back into another account, but in reality is the taxpayer pays for it. So if we were to reduce that amount to a normal amount where we have a common average that goes on, it would be less of a financial burden. And I know Mr. Jackson, somebody may say it's only nickels and dimes or pennies, but it's still an amount of money that the taxpayers would have to pay for. So if we look at it in a frugal aspect of what the average is, and we go on that, rather than inflate it to a larger number, and just because it goes back into a fund balance or it goes back into wages for a later use, we're still penalizing the taxpayer. And that's where I want to make sure we're on the same page. So I'd rather be close to what's being used rather than inflate it to whatever number you want.
Right, so 5 cents probably $1,000.
You can be sarcastic.
Does anybody want to make a motion
I'm not
to?
getting over $100,000 from taxpayers for the salary for my family.
Anybody want to make a motion to approve section 1 of the budget?
I make a motion to approve section 1.
Anybody
I'll second
second?
it. I'll second.
Okay, Jonathan. Clerk, can you take the roll call?
Councilmember Kelly,
Yes.
Councilmember Quinn,
Yes.
Councilmember Friedlander,
Yes.
Councilmember Kritz,
Yes.
Councilmember Selberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks,
Yes.
Councilmember Noon,
Yes.
Vice President Sackett,
Yes.
President Jackson.
Yes, it's 9 yeses. That section's approved. Hey, Mr. Kelly, before you, I'd like to point out, so you're talking about $1,000 overtime. You made 5 motions to adjust the budget in that section. Your changes that you suggested, we're going to increase the budget $13,000. So
That's for those personnel, but you know what, Mr. Jackson, on one quick thing.
$13,000, fiscally responsible.
You're saying that our employees aren't worth it. The mayor increased their salary by how much money,
Going
Mr.
through
Jackson?
section 2. What questions do we have on section 2?
I have a question. Mr. Yachafano, are you there? Town council? Mr. Yachafano?
Yes. What's your question?
When we have some of these departments that are here, that we have in the budget, if we have any of our family members that are, or relatives that are part of that budget line, can we vote?
What's your specific assertion, Mr. Kelly?
Can we vote if we have a family member or a relative in a department or a sub-account in favor of it? Or is that considered a conflict of interest?
Mr. Kelly, the decision to vote or not vote on any issue is an individual decision to each member of the council.
So if I had a family member in a certain department, I could vote in favor for them for an increase, for a budget increase or anything like that?
Mr. Kelly, I hope you were listening to my answer.
I couldn't hear you.
I said, I hope you were listening to my answer.
Well,
my answer was that the decision to vote or not vote or abstain on any issue is a matter of the discretion of the individual member of the council.
Mr. Yachafano, I don't think you heard my question.
Any questions on section 2?
Is it
we're
a
not,
conflict?
Mr. Kelly, we're talking about
forward.
the budget. We're talking about the budget. Any questions on
we
section 2?
We are talking about the budget and voting on the budget. Mr. Yachafano, is it a conflict to vote?
Mr. Kelly, you're out of order. Please stop.
I still have the floor.
don't have the floor. I'm not recognizing you. You're out of order. Stop talking. Any
I've had
questions
the
on
floor
section
from you,
2?
Council President.
Yes, Council
Any-
President.
Yes, go ahead.
I would just like to know, and this is more of a blanket question, did Councilman Kelly submit any questions prior to these
None,
meetings?
none at all, none at
So
all,
you're really just grandstanding. You
none
really
at all,
aren't interested.
none at all. That's what we're here for, to ask questions.
It's a
Because the
grandstand.
public don't
That's
see
it.
the questions in the
You're
email.
grandstanding, Councilman. We all see through it.
No
Anybody have
Mr.
questions? Section
Salberg.
2. What questions on section 2?
Council President,
Yes,
may I be recognized?
absolutely.
I just want to make two statements. The budget, just to remind everybody, and I know that you guys know this, but it's anticipatory. Sometimes certain items are in the budget. Same thing you would do with your budget at home. You budget for car repairs. Maybe your car doesn't break that year and you don't use that money. On the second note, the folks on the council, the councilmen and women who asked questions, who sent them to me, and I was able to craft an answer with the department heads and go to the proper resources. You're more than welcome, if you ask questions prior, as I have said in the past, to repeat those questions for the public and get the public an answer immediately. By asking questions that we are not prepared for at meetings, it slows the process down. You're actually doing the public a disservice. You're not doing.
I disagree.
Mr. Kelly, you're not recognized. You're out of order. You're out of order, as always.
Mr. Kelly, and watching this whole meeting has been chaotic.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any questions on section 2?
I do. I have page
Go ahead,
46.
Mr. Kelly.
46 I have.
Page 46, Mr. Kelly, go ahead.
I have, on page 46, we have overtime for Department 185. Again, we've approved in 2017 $1,000 for overtime, $1,500 in 2018, and $1,500 in 2019. It looks like we've only spent $1,084 in 2020, again, during this pandemic and everything else going on with overtime. Now you're looking to do $2,500. I make a motion to request that 25 down to 1,500 for the overtime. That's $1,000 savings.
I second it. You take the roll call.
Bear with me one moment. I apologize.
No problem.
Joe, can I recognize Joe?
Yes, you are. You're recognized, Pat.
The reason that OT is there is for the planning board meetings, and we have a new employee that will be the secretary at those meetings, and she gets paid overtime.
Who got paid over? Who was the secretary last time? Was it an overtime? What was the overtime used for last time for 2020?
It was used the same thing, but we have
Stop for 1 second. I just want to make mention.
Mr. Mayor, you weren't recognized.
Mr. Mayor, you're recognized.
Thank you.
I just want to make mention. I don't want us to discuss personal.
I have a motion on the floor, by the way.
Just want us to mention that we're not supposed to discuss individuals. We can discuss positions. I just want to put that out there before the conversation.
Nobody said any names. Thank you. But I have a motion on the floor, and we have a vote for that. So there's no discussion during that, please?
Mr. Kelly.
I'll decide if there's discussion or not.
Mr. Mayor, you're a guest.
You're very rude, Mr. Kelly.
No, I'm not. You're interrupting, Mr. Mayor.
You are.
Rude, Mr. Kelly.
You're interrupting, Mr. Mayor.
Why you get
Clerk, you can take the roll
Mr. Mayor,
call.
you're interrupting.
Councilmember Kelly?
Very rude.
Yes.
Councilmember Quinn?
Kelly.
No.
Councilmember Friedlander?
No.
Councilmember Kretz?
No.
Councilmember Salberg?
No.
Councilmember Brooks?
Nah.
Councilmember Noon?
No.
Vice President Sackett?
No.
President Jackson?
Yes, that's 7 no's, 2 yeses. The budget will stay the same. What other questions do you have?
I got a question, Councilman President.
Mr. Brooks, I still have the floor real quick. But as Mr. Salberg said, did you submit your question, Mr. Brooks?
You know what, Mr. Kelly, it's not your position to ask anybody
Well,
that.
neither
So
is
if you have a
Mr.
question,
Salberg.
it's efficient. If you don't have your question ready, I'm going to go to somebody else.
I do. We have on 42, we have department number 180. And we have the affordable housing officer. And I wasn't aware that we had like a housing officer that retired. So is this another like a stipend that somebody receives, or is this actually a salary for the $3,000?
Can I be recognized?
Yes, Ms. Palmieri.
We've always had a housing officer. That housing officer has retired. And a new housing officer has been, taken that spot. It's included in the salary ordinance. And it's an existing employee that is now eligible to receive that stipend.
Oh, okay, on top of their salary for their other position that they hold.
That's right.
We also have on sub-account, well, even on that same page, 42, we have overtime. So for that person with the overtime in that position, Mrs. Palmieri, what would be a potential overtime that they would have to do with the
I got this.
affordable housing officer? Is that something they do during the hours of 8:30 to 4:30, or is it something they do after hours?
They are two separate, they're two separate things. The housing officer is also the secretary for the planning board. So the overtime is for the time spent on the planning board meetings, and the housing officer is usually done during the day, and it's a separate stipend because it's a separate duty.
Well, why is the overtime less for the planning board when they're very involved and more for the zoning officer? I mean, the zoning board that we just didn't approve for the overtime that was inflated to 2,500. Is there less duties of the secretary for the planning board than there is for the zoning board?
I don't believe they meet as often, but perhaps the business administrator can answer that better than I.
How often does each board meet?
It depends on how much business they have, hear cases or not.
Bless you. Whoever just,
Sorry.
On an average, Mrs. Seeger, I mean, is it are board meetings for each board twice a month generally?
Mr. Kelly, we can't give you an answer on that. She just answered it. If we would have asked these questions prior, we could have looked up how many meetings are held.
Mr. Mayor, you weren't recognized. And second of all, what is the purpose of us having a budget meeting if we can't ask questions?
You can ask questions. Exactly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You still haven't been recognized, though.
you don't have an answer. Yeah, what other, so, Ms. Seeger, if you could take that away and maybe send something to Mr. Kelly, that'd be appreciated.
I was making a motion to reduce the overtime for that sub-account from 1,000 to 500.
Is there a second?
And the average was a bit 500 expending all that, so.
All right, there's no second. What other questions do you have?
That's it.
Mr. Brooks, you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Council President. Predominantly because of what occurred in Section 1, would it be safe to say that anything that's like an 028, 029, professional consulting and contractual fees throughout the board is going to be under because it hasn't been billed yet?
Yes, that's safe to assume.
Okay, very good. That answers that. Thank you.
Any other questions on Section 2? Can I get a motion to approve Section 2?
I make a motion to approve Section 2.
Second.
Okay. Clerk, you can take the roll call.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Councilmember Quinn?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedlander?
Yes.
Councilmember Kritz,
Yes.
Councilmember Salberg,
Yes.
I bet Kelly didn't ask about the money.
Councilmember Brooks,
Cases he has.
I bet I did.
Yes.
Councilmember Noon,
Yes.
President Sackett,
Yes.
Yes.
President Jackson,
Yes. Motion carried. Okay, I think in the essence of time, because our next meeting starts soon, what I'm going to say is let's open up to public now. So we've gone through the first two sections. We'll pick up on section 3 on Thursday. So clerk, if you could start opening it up to members of the public. And members of the public will get 5 minutes to speak, just like a regular meeting.
Ryan Whittig,
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. First of all, I don't have any comment on
Please,
any of the
if you could just,
budget.
Mr. Whittick, just for procedures, could you state your name and
Oh, I'm
address?
sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Brian Whittick, 18 North Lakeshore Drive, Rockaway, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Thank you for recognizing me. I can't comment on the budget because I can't see it. No resident in the town can see it except for the council members right now. It's very unfortunate that the administration has made that decision. Why have this meeting open to the public when the public can't see the budget? How can you possibly make an intelligent comment and even an unintelligent comment? It's the only thing I could really see was Mr. Sarinelli that I could comment on. He mentioned a 1.69% tax increase. We're already the 7th highest effective tax rate in Morris County out of 39 municipalities, and now we have an increase. I just think that you have to look at the budget. You have to see the duress that the pandemic has caused, the unemployment, the pain, and you're still willing to raise the tax rate 1.69%. Further, there was a motion to increase the salaries of the council members, the mayor. It's just incredible. But you guys are going to carry on. I have nothing else. Please try to lower the budget. Please try to get property taxes in line. Please try to lower them. You all live here. You all pay property taxes. Doesn't it bother each of you that your property taxes are sky high? Have been. They only were reduced in 2 years when the former majority was in place. I wish we could go back to those days. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller. You're on mute, Chrissy.
I'm rusty. Calling user 3,
Calling user 3.
and
Okay.
that's it, Joe.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, it's 20 after. I think if we want to adjourn this way, we have 10 minutes to our regular meeting starts. Let's make a motion to adjourn.
Council President, are we staying online or are we going to go ahead and dial into the
We'll dial into the new one so we can get off this call and dial into the next one. All in favor of adjourning for 10 minutes? Aye.
Oh, we need a motion and a second.
Okay, so I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, me and Manny. Clerk, you can take the roll call.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Councilmember Quinn?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedlander?
Yes.
Councilmember Kretz,
Yes.
Councilmember Salberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks,
Yes.
Councilmember Noon,
Yes.
Vice President Sackett, President Jackson.
Yes. Okay, the meeting's adjourned. We'll see everybody in 10 minutes.
Now I go to a different. I can find the